That is illustrated here. This is a female snail, and here you see the development of the small penis. Unfortunately for the snail, it's an unfunctional penis. So it has lost its female capacity for reproduction. It has, in replacement, it got a penis, but it can't do nothing with it. And so if that happens, this results in population collapse very rapidly. And that's also what happens. Now, just to finish, are we in extremely bad conditions? We are basically improving. There are new things being discovered, new compounds, new challenges, for example, related to climate change, because climate change together with chemical pollution creates a totally new condition. But just to illustrate you here something from the Scheldt, nearby, we are somewhere here, I think. That is the salinity gradient, and the Scheldt, and every freshwater body in Belgium, and I would say by extension Europe, was in extremely bad shape in the 70s, in the 80s. We have been monitoring this for decades already. And I show you some of the results. I only show you dissolved oxygen, which is very important because we all need oxygen, and aquatic species, of course, also. So this is here 1996. It's not so long ago, 1996. And this is 2022, and the last series of data that we have. This is the distance from the mouth of the Scheldt. So here we are closest to the mouth of the Scheldt. This actually is the Netherlands-Belgium border, 60 kilometers away from the mouth of the Scheldt. And this is the oxygen level. You see this very thin line that I've drawn here is at 6 milligrams per liter. That's what we need to have at least. Better 8, 9, 10, but at least 6. And you see this is the situation, red. This is somewhere between 0 and 3. So 1996, all over the place, complete without oxygen. And hypoxic or even anoxic condition. And then it improved. But it's only, let's say, not much more than 12, 13 years ago that we get into a reasonably acceptable condition. So that's not much more than 10 years ago. Right? So that's where we were. And if you go the next part towards the 80s, you can imagine what it was. And that was all over the place. But you see, it has much improved. So there is also some good news. And this is because it has been understood that certain things have to happen and that things have to improve. My final slide is something that actually is also present in this room, there at the back, and that's the project of here, Miriam Bush. And I was invited during this part of the hydromedia project by Inge Henneman, also from Casca, to present a talk on to these 4 artists in residence on water and water-related problems, because hydromedia, as it suggests, it also relates to water. So to give them some, let's say, scientific environmental context, to then also develop their work within that framework. And I had very nice interactions with all of the 4 artists in residence, and especially with Miriam. Because from that, what she's actually doing, and if you have the time, just have a look at the exhibition at the end of this room. She's making photographs of puddles. She calls the project puddle watching. So she creates images of the environment, the urban environment, by imaging the puddles that are present in this environment. And they have a certain dynamic, because suddenly they are generated, then they disappear again, and so on. She also takes water samples that are here in these bottles. There are also some bottles over there. And we have now extended this project in terms of now trying to physically and chemically characterize these waters, what is in these bottles, and to what extent can this, let's say, scientific analytical approach tell us something about the environment in which these puddles are generated? We've also presented this as a thesis subject for a master's student, and that student will start working on that project next week. So we're looking forward to see what is happening with that, because basically these are bubbles that there's a lot of interesting information in these bubbles, because they reflect to a certain extent the nature and the anthropogenic impact of the local environment captured by the water of the puddles. That's the next step. We will see what we get out of that. Okay, that's basically what I wanted to present to you.
Hi everybody, I am Marjolijn. Thanks to Alexandra and Edith for Kristof for the invitation. I'm happy to be here. What I will do is I will introduce two different projects that relate. The first one will relate to the topic of water, and also looking at pollution in water and human influences on water. And another project will relate to energy, the energy transition and digital technologies, which are also both topics that we're addressing tonight in this later talk. As an artist, as already introduced, I have an individual project. I also collaborate a lot with sometimes other artists or sometimes technicians, artisans, activists, a lot of different kinds of individuals. I'm also the co-founder of Open Space, and one of the projects I represent will also show some work in context of my project of Open Space. Open Space was also founded to work together with artists on long-term research projects. So for me, it's always really interesting to work around the topic for multiple years and also approach it from different perspectives with different artists, but also as an artist with different media. So I also try to give a bit of insight into this project. The first project that I would like to show is a project that I developed together with artist Florian Zanatta, an Norwegian artist, with the Mood Museum. And we were invited to respond to the fact that the Mood Museum was going to move to the Oslo Fjord from the city, so they were moving. In the back you see it was still on construction, but at the moment it's already open. And we were invited to respond to this new context and to make work in urban space, or it could be cultural work, or actually it was pretty open invitation. And we decided to work with the new neighborhood of this museum, so actually it was moving to the water side and to a place where there was a river running down the mountains into the fjord. So it was the brackish waters, and also the waters from the river were running in front of the museum. So we worked with the microorganisms in this particular site, the ecosystem of this place, but also in the river and also in the fjord. So we worked with the microbiology department of the University of Oslo, and we've been taking samples either by boat or just by hand. And we've made a film that was presented for multiple months outdoors. So here you see the projection on the right, above the water. We literally show all these kind of processes and life inside the water on the place where we also took the samples. As part of the film, we worked in the laboratory. We used a microscope as a camera, which was a real challenge because every movement is extremely fast, but we managed to turn it really into a cinematic tool. And the microscope itself, the architecture of the microscope also became part of the setting of the film. So all these different settings, but also the counting bricks, for instance, and all kind of different elements part of the microscope are all features that were also implemented within the film, that were also explored as an agent as part of the film. So here you see, for instance, the counting grid with microorganisms, which is also a form of architecture by itself. The film is really fictional in the sense that we have created call scenes, so we refer to all these kind of scientific animals and we get the counting grids, the focus changes in seconds of this microscope, but we use them as dramatic tools. Here, for instance, you see a shot, just show a few stills of a micropipette that is used to isolate one organism from a sample. But in our film, it's also kind of a dramatic gesture because when we do this, we isolate one specimen, and then often it's used to cultivate the monoculture, which is quite a dramatic action to take. Also, something that people will be touched by is the fact that the closer you want to get to what these organisms with using a microscope, the more risk is it that they will actually die. So with a light microscope, if you would do something through a glass plate, it's very likely that things will dry up and that the organisms die. And if you use a electron microscope or microscopy, anyway, the specimens will be dead already. So it's a quite cruel, there's also a cruelness about these things. On the one hand, you have the curiosity in this life, but on the other hand, it's also quite cruelness. And I will show a small fragment, so we need some sound. All the specimens are mentioned as the patches at the end. We also look at two microorganisms to emphasize the fact that they recognize the most. So what we saw here were lots of samples, also including microplastics, and samples that were also in the void scale that was happening in the field. So there are also a lot of these kind of polluting elements part of the film that we normally don't really see on a microscopic scale, but they are also, of course, affecting that on this kind of small scale. And the music was made by Henry Vega, the composer who used the cello as a common element of the composition and the computer-generated sounds on the other hand to emphasize the life of the microorganisms in the cello, to emphasize the movements in the architecture of the microscope, to both invented in the same period of time, so to emphasize the period of development. And we also have the live performances from the music representative. As part of the commission, we also made an installation where in the daytime and also later in a large installation setting, you could also engage with this life on a smaller scale with glass spheres, where here you can see the large installation. Where we made glass spheres with a glass blower and taking extra into the glass to create lenses. So you see these magnifying lenses on the glass sphere, so you can see the light inside enlarged. It's a large installation that always is rebuilt in different constellations in relation to the space, and locally sampled. Then I would like to show another project in the context of Innovation for Space. So it's a work I made as part of the project on trade-off, which was founded by Innovation for Space collaboration with Pizza and the Commercial. And it looks at the future developments of a lithium mine in the north of Katanga, which will be exploited in the future by a Chinese Australian company. And together with a whole group of artists who are following since 2008 in the developments around this future mine. And I, as an artist, have been looking, so everybody's looking at different elements in relation to the situation, and I've been looking myself at electricity as a phenomenon and an agent within this whole process. And also thinking about electricity being something that is quite invisible for us today. So we take it for granted that it's coming out of the sockets everywhere, but we don't really see it anymore. We don't feel it as a natural kind of agent. Here's an image of this mining situation that's under construction at the moment. The lithium that they are going to exploit is in rock form, so in spodumene, and yes, what they found that the company is going to exploit is that it's the largest lithium deposit in the world, so it will have quite big consequences for everybody living in this environment. What I would like to show, because it's a really big project with a lot of different elements to go into, but if you're interested in seeing more of all the other arts that we've been using, you can see our website as well in the space. I'm just going to show a few works that I've realized within this project. I was also inspired, often in my work I go back to historical moments in science or in society and politics to see how things have developed. And often in my work I also end up in the period of the Enlightenment to see that a lot of it's a lot of foundation of the scientific discoveries related to that period of time. When you think about electricity and energy, in these days, in the 18th century, electricity came up as a science that was also shared publicly. It was really symbolic in the time of Enlightenment, as a kind of conquering of nature, of the ultimate. When they discovered the lightning rod, for instance, it was really seen as an ultimate symbol of conquering the biggest force of nature. And it was often presented in this kind of public presentation, so people could feel and touch and see the electricity, and a lot of women were also part of these public demonstrations, and children, a lot of subjects were part of these demonstrations. And I wanted in my work to go back to this moment where you could feel, see, touch electricity as a physical agent. So I've been developed in a lot of different works. This is a collaborative work I made with Congolese artists in Congo for the Bashi Biennial, where Jean-Paul Vincent who built a model of Tesla from Copper, and I brought several suitcases in Tesla oil and this performance, Tesla Crash, Nikola Tesla as the ultimate utopian inventor, and the Tesla as a symbol of green capitalism. Then I developed a new technique of electrophotography, where I used the transparent top layer of screen, touchscreen technology, like the touchscreen on the phone, for instance, or on monitors, to conduct electricity and to capture electricity on film or photo. So here you see this experimental setup. So I worked together with an electric technician to develop this. It was really a lot of experimentation, but after a long time I managed to capture it in film and photo. Here you see two photos of small pieces of mineral from a mono that one of the artists brought to me, so just little pieces of rock. And inside the rock there is the lithium that is happening, and it's very conductive. So under this, in this kind of setup that I built, I put high voltage sparks and let's say coming out of these rocks and capture them. Here also we see a large wall installation with all the different elements relating to coal and lithium and e-waste and to electrical technologies. Closer. So all the light that you see is electricity. It's light electricity. There's no other light sources used to make these images. And I've also made a film using this technology, where I looked at the units of electricity and compared what's all the units that we use to describe the units of electricity. It's a system that is also developed in the 18th century, and all these units are named after the inventors of that period of time. And it's a system that is really everywhere around the world. All the electric technicians will use this language, and also there's a lot of symbols relating to this, and it's all standardized. It's all kind of a universal language. I have used these 9 units as chapters for the film. Here you see, for instance, also symbols. And I show just a small teaser showing a lot of different fragments from the film, but the film is 25 minutes, so you just have a little bit of an idea of what kind of material is in there. Also the sound. Yes? Okay.
The sound was very, very soft, but all the sound was created by a composer, Paul Bouvier, who recorded me while experimenting in my studio. So it's all electric frequencies that are made to use the composition. Then I've also made a series of sculptural works with electricity as an agent to really create the work. Inspired by fulgurites that are created when lightning hits, for instance, a beach. When you have very fine sand with salt, it can melt. There's such an amount of energy coming into the sand that it can melt and create fulgurites into the sand. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but they're kind of shaped like a root. Like lightning. And I was inspired by this to also create a series of sculptures with earth from a mine in Belgium, here in Genk, coal mine, the sand of a coal mine, and some sand from Anono, and sand from Lommel that is used for glass making here in Belgium. It's really fine sand. And again, with the electric technician, I developed a technique to replicate this kind of process to create artificial fulgurites, let's say. So here you can see this in process. So it's creating a lot of energy into the sand, literally melting it into the shape, growing into the sand, and resulting into an installation with all these different kind of naturally shaped or artificially shaped forms of sand. And as you can see here, they really look look like naturally created in a sense, like not controlled, right? So I couldn't control this process. It's really sculpting with electricity. And I also added sometimes a bit of copper, or there were like pieces of coal in the sand that you can still see. It became black, or you see little pieces of coal as part of these sculptures. And here's another installation of this piece as part of an exhibition with Antwerp we had this year in Amsterdam. And then the last work I will share that is actually in development at the moment is a live performance as part of this research project, where I, together with the composer, Paul Bouvier, and Jean Kattenbay, who's also part of the project on trade-off, are developing a performance consisting of live experiments turned into sound composition, a projection with images that resemble also that were part of my film, and a text that is also written to rethink all these 9 different units of electricity that Jean has written. And yeah, we're currently still developing this, but I will show just a small clip of a first experiment we did this year in Frame and Framed.
L'armature. La charge n'a pas de sensibilité morale.
Basic foundation of research, and if they don't touch, in fact, with the center of our work, there are basically 3 things. One is social media. Sociologists cannot study anymore society without thinking of social media. There is also, of course, the Anthropocene, so that humans and nature, you cannot divide them anymore. And then there's finally also this transhumanism, this new converging technologies, and the idea that humanity itself, or humans, become the center of scientific research, and to check and how to change it, to improve on it. And so I made three parts. One part is like what are now actually these different technologies, and how did people provide it. So I have done it from all these different technologies, main researchers, and their fantasies about it. But I divided the documentary in three series, a little bit Aristotelian, because I thought I cannot mix them still, so I want to mix them, but it's very hard on one hand to exact sciences. The second part is more the ethical, the pros and cons, and the third part is the metaphysics, part. So I call this transhumanism part. And for me, it was also funny because of all their fantasies, how we can mix different species among each other. So for me, it was really funny to illustrate this natural scientists in their fantasies, because I got so much you come across. It was hard to keep all the metaphysics about the and so the second part where I contrast these discussions, pros and cons, you have to get as fast as possible, also that the public debate doesn't catch up with what's happening. So otherwise they might focus. So I want to become immortal, and other people say we have this and so on. So I brought this thing together, this because all these people, they have some kind of confused. That's why I call it technical, because it is the really source or final revelation of eternal life, or the downfall of the and then I introduced from all the different religions. I can say it was like the Dalai Lama. It took me 2 years to get it, but he said to me, I only had I could come in for one question, and I said exactly what I wanted to say. So yeah, maybe the humans and machines, robots. Maybe next nation, the Dalai Lama will be one of like that. But so he believes in these things. So I had a lot of science really have this kind of very strange physical ways of thinking of how we are annihilating God. How they calculate with computer power. When we'll be able to send rockets using colonize the universe, and that cosmic network, what will be by that time computer capacity, and will they rethink us, will they bring us to God at the end of time by rethinking us into a computer program. But this, for example, the theory of Frank Hitler as the inventor of Runch theory. So all the scientists that you would surprised in artificial intelligence, but these people have a Jewish background, and they say that in their bar mitzvah, basically all of them are promised that you will revive the goal. That was what said at their bar mitzvah. So you see that every different religion, there are very strange ideas about knowledge that you cannot have more as a basically rational debate. So that was about so. This is just isolation. I learned about them to digitize those corpses on the internet. Finally, I got technology because they were sliced like this, and then the computer would make it slices like this, and I made them donkeys. They were nice slices like this, and I made them donkeys. They were not connected. One was a woman who died of disease, and the guy was convicted murderer who was that sentence. This is at the moment I heard that Google didn't allow you to film their buildings, and then I was shocked. Come on. They can film my house and I cannot film their house. So I went over there and I got with someone with an open roof car, so we drove around and I was filming. And every building they stopped me. And I said, "It's no problem, I will blur all the faces." So yeah, it was a funny thing to do. I was working on another project which I will show later, which is computer simulation of what will happen in the next 100 years or in this century with climate change. And I was in contact with several scientists about it. I did so much of it. I did one in the Belgium, one in Zaal in Brussels. Where I invited top scientists who were working on this the IPCC, the International Panel for Climate Change. Like there in the blue, that's Philip Huibert, who was the editor-in-chief of the last report. So my problem with the whole report and with the whole thing is that how can you visualize this? How can you bring this thing in one picture together? And so I invite people from several disciplines. So from a natural scientist, a geologist, a biologist, and then someone who's Roger Housen, colonel, who in fact he was the specialist of conflict analyst of the NATO. In fact, he was the specialist of conflict analyst of the NATO for years, based on climate change. So, what will be the conflicts that will occur? And then also the people who have been working on the report about migration. And so I gave them a small table with all pots of paint, and I let them explain in 3 acts. The first act was 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, and then more than 4 degrees. After Technopolis, I wanted to also research several laboratories, and I wanted to research where they have a problematic research done. And I've done a few with where I also invited, or where I could fit, where a social scientist was following them. So to have that confrontation on the scene of the research itself. But here, this was for me an interesting thing where they try to, I call it milligram rewoken. Maybe you know the milligram test of where someone gets electroshocks. And here the same thing. So, but it's a little bit different. So 2 people they have to vote there. They have their cards. So one takes a card, you get the electroshocks, and the other one will get into the fMRI scanner. And so it's to see what will happen when you see the other one in pain. When she did so they do a little quiz. When she got wrong, when he got wrong, when they both got wrong, or when they both are right. It's only when they both are right that in this case it was she. And it's always she, because she is in fact the researcher. So she doesn't get the shocks. Well, actually, she filmed herself with the shocks because for her, I need to have the real expression for the shock, but I need to have the same expression for all the people. So, so it was always a video that they showed to them. There were some interesting cases. So finally, for me, it becomes a forensic research because she did her research wrong. At first, she discovered that in fact Asian people are much more empathy than Caucasian people. But it's only with discussion that she realized, oh no, they were all looking at an Asian person. So it's only afterwards that she said, okay, and that we see at the end of the film, we see her colleagues who are Caucasian getting the electroshock for continuing the test. She did some other mistakes also, so, but it's very interesting when you see how they then change all the data, and so to reinterpret, to make the sum, or how do you say that, well, all kind of calculations so that you can actually come out with a result or so. So that's what the thing is about. Then I did a series called Lab Life, where I did the same. I followed a research team, but each time with the social scientists. They call themselves embedded humanists. And it's something quite unique. The name Lab Life, maybe, well, it refers to Brune Latour, his Laboratory Life, his first book, where he himself was a fly on the wall in the research team. But the difference is, Brune Latour was an observer. So he just noted down what they did. There's now a movement within the social sciences of people who want to do midstream modulation, they call it. So normally the research is at the beginning, and there are some ethicists also who check if everything is okay, and then it's a go. But then it can take 10 years, maybe or longer, and then the army gets involved, and something, an implant for I don't know, for memory loss also becomes something to control soldiers. This is not a joke. This is one of the cases in Technopolis that I showed. So they want, normally it is at the end, again, when it has to come out of the market, that ethicists are going to show again, are going to look again like, is this okay or not? And when they say no, then you have 10 years of research that was done for nothing. And so I had, it took me 2 years to find a laboratory that would allow a social scientist from outside to look in all the drawers and talk to them with a little finger. And on top have a cameraman following that whole discussion. And finally, I found 3 interesting projects, one in biogenetics, one in brain implants, and one in nanotechnology. And with the 3 of them, it was very problematic by the end, in fact, the confrontation of them. This was just a team of students with biogenetics who, there's an international contest every year. They call it ADEM, International Genetic Engineering Machines. They call it machines, but in fact it's organisms. It's viruses, yeast cells, or bacteria, where they put a small piece of genes in it, and it's really digital. At one moment, so what they did is to have a yeast cell, and the whole reproduction system of the yeast cell. They used to, instead of smelling the pheromones of the other sex, to smell tuberculosis, and then to have the whole process that instead of that they are ready for getting sex, they get green fluorescent, and these things they cannot get on the market, but therefore they use it for contests of students. So it's a whole system where they do these kind of things because it's synthetic biology. Finally, they took something of our genes from a smell sensor of tuberculosis. It's a tar smell specific molecule, and then with some prefixes and suffixes on the whole thing to fix it in the chromosome. It's in fact one page of in Word of CCTTGGAAG, and that they send over the internet to a German company, and then DHL delivers the little white powder to bring it, and then they can, then they have it and they can implement it in organisms. That's how it works. So I followed them, and we also followed, there was also then the social scientists. And so what they wanted to do with it is, of course, so you have a little package of this yeast and somebody pukes in it. And then when it becomes a green fluorescent, you know that this person has tuberculosis. And it's very interesting. Today they use rats, big rats that can smell it or so. This would be much more easy. But one of the first questions of my social scientist was, and these yeast cells, what temperature do they survive? Well, yeah, they shouldn't go higher than 35 degrees Celsius. And then so, yeah, but when you want to use it in Africa, and so how long will it last? And so, yeah. So in fact, that's a very nice example for this midstream modulation. Like, in fact, the whole research was for nothing. Even you cannot bring it on the market anyway, but normally if you would have thought to do it, then it would have made no sense because it wouldn't be useful. The second one is at this is now the Amsterdam Medical Center, where they are the psychiatric department. They are world leader in implants for psychiatric patients, and which is very unique is that the next building is a Netherlands Institute for Neuroscience, and where they do research on mice and rats and even apes. The apes I couldn't film, but this department of the psychiatry. So they do implants for depression and OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, and they don't know how it works. It works, but they don't know how. So they train or they try to produce rats and mice that are depressive or have obsessive compulsive disorder, and then to try the implant on them to see, like, in fact, why does it work with the humans? So it's the other way around, and we normally think that research is done. And so I followed them, and then also with the social scientists. Finally, the social scientist was discovered by the guy who takes care of the animals, and she is a bioethicist from the University of Leiden. But he recognized her, and she's an activist. She's an activist. She's somebody who's very moderate in her opinions about it, and so. She thinks you can use mice for certain reasons if it's defendable for such and such reasons, and so immediately she was person non grata on the whole thing. So she couldn't come in the building anymore. Finally, I organized. That's another project. Actually, I did a whole month programming on. It's called the Brain Sessions. I did where I invited this team and also the next team. First, we'll talk about that. That's a group of Indian researchers in Japan, and their work is fascinating. Also, what's his name? No, I forgot his name. The big quantum physics guy from Oxford. What? Sorry? No, he's dead. The other one, but this guy came over, Roger Penrose, because he's so fascinated in the research of these people, and so he came over to Amsterdam, and I invited him also in the discussion, and so that we had. But these guys are crazy, and it's so fascinating research, and the problem is that so they work in Japan, in the 3 top research institutions in the world on nanotechnology. This guy has huge machines that is the only one to be able to scan on the atomic scale organic material. But you don't believe what these guys are doing. So they created first a molecule, and he says that molecule resonates in a way that it can kill cancer cells. And they're doing research in India. Nobody knows, but so other people are doing research with that molecule on cancer treatment. But some of these people, they discovered that after a while they form in a solution. They form wires, these molecules, And then they started to think like, hey, but maybe if that's the case, so they discovered it is because of electrical fields. If we can have electrical pulses, then maybe we can create an artificial intelligence in an organic way or semi-organic way. And then they started to research the brain, the human brain. But what is funny in this team, because they are nanotechnologists, they always make models. So he goes to a $1 store where he buys styrofoam, iron wires, and all kind of crap, like you see there on the second. So that's his representation of the human brain. Because he says, I always want to see it three-dimensional, but it's absurd. You don't believe what he bought in the $1 store. All kind of toilet equipment. So that's what the proof that he shows me, where he makes this thing where you really start to see all these connections and so on. But finally, he researches the human brain, and then he thinks like, but how does the connection between two neurons work? Is the only one so it takes the connection wire. The standard model of our brain is so a human neuron receives information, and at a certain moment it fires. After so many several constructions, why at a certain moment it fires, and it fires to its own connections, which are 10-20,000, and in the standard model it is that they are all the same signal, but in fact it's not. So on the road it changes, and nobody knows how. And so he has a theory, because he could with this machine check inside the microtubules, which are like, every wire is like an electrical wire. So you have this all these copper wires inside with plastic around. It's the same. So there is some layer of fat around, and in between you have these microtubules, 100, 200, like that. And he connected that in fact they vibrate. It's ultrasonic, but so, and then the whole New Age movement jumped on it. You see that it's possible to be on the same frequency. He doesn't believe it, but he also doesn't care. So we have a social scientist following this. He was an American. He said, "Don't go into that. Don't go." But he doesn't care even more, because then finally in the Bakkegrond, so I invited them. And with all this crap that he made, and I let them explain, but they did also live their researches on the neuron and so. No, I lost what I wanted to say. Yeah, well, so, and also Penrose and other people, they discussed, we had a debate, because I also wanted to know, so the whole field of this research, all these people came from everywhere in the world, and I invited them for a first day to have the debate, and I hope that during the debate I would know like how these people think of this work, because it's so fantastic, but nobody can prove what he says is right or wrong. And in fact, nobody knows afterwards. So he just continues his work, and he publishes or so, but nobody can tell if what he does makes sense or not. So this is another work that I made a year or 2 years ago. Actually, it's because another work I couldn't do anymore because of COVID. There was a lockdown. I was doing also a documentary series on the commons. I wanted to follow several commons communities, and then the lockdown came. If there's one thing you cannot film anymore at that moment, it's a commons movement. And so finally, I had the film fund that gave me funds for that project. And I had some private or other institutions that gave me some funding. The film fund said it's fine to put it in the freezer. The others said no, it has to be made within this year, or you lose the money. You have to give it back. And so I was there like, shit, what can I do? So I started to film already, and but then I proposed to them another work that I could do at home. That I started to do with an American game company. So it's this computer simulation where we have, so we integrated we had all the data of the last report of the IPCC. They gave it to us before it was published. But we could integrate it. And it's the first time that I made a work of art just by working in Excel. Because in fact, we had all the data, and these people, they made a program, and actually, these are, so it's 3 screens on the table, 3 times 4K, but you can zoom in twice. So it's in fact, finally, you can see it's the resolution of 48 HD screens. And that is live rendered by the computer. The computer is inside the table. It looks a little bit like a snooker thing, because that's how it turned out with my sound boxes on it. Then I thought, yeah, well, then it is a snooker table. And so you can zoom in and you see all things that happen, and it's all on this data. So we made world maps. They have different scenarios. And how is it called now? RP or RCP. RCP. It's a long time ago already, 2 years ago. There's a 4, there's a 8.5, and there's a 2.8. That's the most optimistic scenario. These are different scenarios with all things of so much rainfall, so much chance for wildfire, and all these things are on the world map. So we had all these world maps, and we made a small system so that we could make the changes and see it on the map. And in fact, that's the way that our program works. So where, for example, population gets higher, you get more buildings at that spot, and so it grows automatically. Or it disappears, and so or wildfires, it's at random at these places. But I wanted to add other things, like how do you see that there is one place, one location, one city that where the population leaves. So of course we have then the traffic roads of migration, but also I wanted container ships. And so I made a total, I had all the lists of every year, the amount of containers of every harbor, or the 300 biggest. And then I did an estimation based on the population for their estimations of the container ships further in this Excel file, until finally the computer couldn't handle that. So we had to skip the container ships. I hope that with Apple just came out with a new computer chip, and NVIDIA also, so that maybe with the next generation of computers, it's possible to finally calculate the whole program. But so this is at the end where it ends a little bit in smoke, and the worst case scenario. This is for example, this model where you see how so the dollars based on the data of IPCC, and in fact they're using now our program, because they only had the Unix where they had to type in every year, and then it would render. So with us, they just could with the cursor switch from 2000 to 2100 and see where it moves, where it evolves. They never had that before, so now they use our program. These are it's generating. I had several characters of people. So for conflict, for migration, for tourists, so it's a certain amount of each, and then to see how they would interact with one another. And then so we had tests to bring these people together, and for me it was so funny to bring these people together, that so just in a test case, so when you have somewhere protesters and police come in to knock them down, and so so I made several test cases of that. Yeah. This was the other one that was cancelled. So this is just where here I follow some Syrian refugees. They squatted in Athens, but they didn't get any food anymore after it was so-called solved by Europe, and then. There's a whole team that started to rent some farm places to cultivate by themselves their own food. So I followed them, and I followed also the ZAD in somewhere in the neighborhood of Nantes. And I was there at the moment that the police knocked down. I was the only press journalist who was allowed. So well, I knew it was going to get too long. So, but I could otherwise show a little part where I have champ contre champ of me filming from the side of the police and then from the side of the others also. But from both, well, the other thoughts, of course, some of them, I knew some of them luckily, but others started to think that I was from the police, so they started to throw stones and bottles at me also. But so I hope to finish that one soon too. That's it.
Thank you very much for everybody. I feel very humble and a bit grateful to present something after such insightful and inspiring presentation. I hope everybody is not too sleepy. I will try to make it a bit. So I'm Florian Zanatta. I'm coming from Liège, Belgium, and I would present in two times. The first one will be focusing on the citizen ecological science lab that I co-founded a bit more than 2 years ago. The experience that we had through that, and afterwards I will be a bit talking about my work as a researcher. There is a lot of bridges that could be made with every presentation, but I will let that for later. So Last Theme is the name of this nonprofit that we co-founded, and that is a lab of a collaborative citizen multidisciplinary lab of ecology, mainly focusing on urban ecology first, but we spread also in more forested and reserves also in Belgium. And so the experience that I will try to show a bit is trying to make this kind of moments and in space and time, so to bridge between a citizen and scientist and artist also during this kind of event. So this is a map of a satellite map of Liège. Is this? Yeah, there's a word. So with the Meuse River here and the Ourthe River that goes from the Ardennes up there to go into the Meuse until it goes further north through Maastricht. And so the first experience, so this whole idea of doing, to try to found or to experiment this citizen open lab, kind of nomadic. We don't have an actual lab. We go from places to places with portable stuff, portable microscopes, and so on. You'll see. But the idea, we were coming from different fields. So I'm coming from biogeography and botany fields, so doing ecological niche models, climate change impacts on plants in Europe mainly. That was actually one of the main motivation, also the realization that I was working during my whole PhD thesis on a subject that was highly linked or interesting or important to transfer as a knowledge to the whole society, and that was not, of course, made as fast as it should be. So it was a reflection on how to bridge easier between the ivory tower of science and the actual life of citizen. And we were thinking of which kind of event could be interesting to organize, and something that is kind of famous. I think you already heard about this kind of event is bioblitzes. So mainly bioblitzes are biodiversity monitoring of one particular space in one particular area of time, one day mainly, in order to increase the knowledge of the biodiversity that is in particular places. And the interesting thing with that is that you could make it kind of open, participative citizen event, and that's what we basically organized. So, and the idea to kind of put it as a research project was to make it as a collaborative mapping project, using these bioblitzes as a way to increase the quality of the data that exists. So that's my focus is botany. So I used first the plant biodiversity focus. So this is the all working and Mesa Botanical Garden, and that's the for the whole area. So that's more or less the the city of Liège. The whole area is the city of Liège, and all F dots here is a presence of different plant species, and that's the actual data that was already available on the observation.be platform, which is an open source platform where everything from the official monitoring to any citizen monitoring based on different applications that you can use, everything is downloaded to after verification from experts from different fields, animals, plants, mushroom, fungi, etc. Everything appears in the observation.be platform. You can and so you can select. You can select. Sorry, you can select an area and have all the data that is present there. So from this point of view, we realized that there were some interesting spots, and that was not the only reason to focus on this first spot. This first spot here is the Chartreuse Park, which is an abandoned, more or less, it's a city park, but it's very particular because it's actually an old fortress, and it was actually even before an abbey from the Chartreuse monks, actually. So that was used afterward during the First and the Second World War to host the secret services and the resistance also. So there is a whole story of wars behind that. That was also a part of the defense department until the 90s. And then it was back to the Liège city that bought it back. And then they let it basically a bit go away. So the nature really recolonized the whole also building area of the place. So it's also famous for urbex and all this tendency. But so that a bit look like that. So you have the whole wood that is something about 40 hectares. And so that's where we decided to organize the first BioBlitz, because also there were a very interesting dynamic because of citizen organizing there starting in 2013, 2014, because they learned about a project that was actually here that was aimed to build new buildings on an area of 3 hectares, more or less. And they were very worried about that because they used, of course, a lot the whole wood to run, to walk their dog, or to just have a walk in the countryside. As you see, it's really close from the center. It's just up a hill. And it's really unique to have this kind of big forested areas for an urban city in Western Europe in general. So that's it. We just planned how we would manage to do a BioBlitz. We didn't have any previous experience except meeting and seeing people that already had organized some stuff like that. And so basically we decided that there were 4 different habitat type that were interesting to go to with the citizen and try to sample and to monitor the most diverse possibility of life. And so there were hawthorn forest here that was kind of conserved. And here, ruderal species, which means species that are adapted to perturbated areas. A forest border, which is interesting also, and also wetlands with a pond that is also part of a reserve. So basically, there is very small areas where there is reserve and conservation management, but the rest is like abandoned and recolonization by wild nature. So yeah, that's how it worked. So for this first BioBlitz, we experimented it because it was very big and we wanted to go on these different areas. We decided that it will be more or less guided. So we had people focusing on plants, people focusing on animals, people focusing on cryptogams, which I was taking part of. So mosses, lichens, molds, all this kind of strange stuff. And so we had the first step was to go by group following this different expert in the different areas. And then we had the second time there where we could compare and trying to to identify more further the species that we had. So we had also all this microscope that was also very used by the people, and they were kids as adults also very amazed to look at a spider or anything a lichen under the microscope, which was also nice. So nothing very special at first sight, because it's a recognized pioneer forest. That we call pioneer forest is the first step of our indigenous forest cycles. So mainly Betula, so it's not the willow, I don't remember the actual English name, but the willow also, the ash, all these species that you can find in the wasteland, basically. And so, yeah, it was guided. So that's one of my friend, colleague, that was showing these ruderal plants. And actually, there was also already very interesting stories to tell about these species. Some are non-indigenous; they came from elsewhere, and they adapted because they are tolerant to this kind of perturbated area. But also some, I had a friend, a colleague from the Maze Botanic Garden that is specialized in lichens that came to share with the people his knowledge, and that was a kind of a highlight to be able to, on these 2-3 hours of walk with the people and sharing, etc., to identify around 37 species of lichens, including strange stuff like lichenized fungi, so mainly a fungi that colonize a lichen that is already a fungi with the same biosis with an algae growing on a plant, which was like a kind of say that kind of box in the box habitat on a habitat on a species, which was kind of a nice reflection and to share with the people also. And yeah, and also we had the collaboration with an artist, a friend of us that is really interesting in nature, and that has also a very nice dynamic to reuse disposed material that he find everywhere, and to make what he called public art. So mainly like doing a live painting somewhere and then letting it there for the people to enjoy, or that would represent something in relation to the place and so on. So here he basically was adding some kind of strange stuff going out of a beetle, because a ladybug, sorry, because we were with a friend that was looking at the fungi growing. One of the colleagues of Maze Botanic Garden is specialized in the fungi that grows on bugs, and actually there is a lot of them, even in Belgium. Not the amazing one that you see, the zombie style that you can have in tropical areas, but we have anyway some fungi that grows on insects, and it's a very, very narrow topic of research, but it actually is a thing and very poorly known. So another, the second BioBlitz that we organized was also something interesting, more on the historical point of view also, and the dynamic, the relation to post-industrial recolonization of the wild species. Here is a terril, so basically a spoil pit from the industrial time. So you had there you have two terril actually. You have the batterie ancien, so the old one, on which we organize the BioBlitz, and the new one that is really more like still a pit, a peak like that is way more unstable. So it was not so, it was not a good idea to go with the citizen there and the chance to lose one on the boulders or something. So we focused there. And as you see here, it was really poorly sampled already. So that is the whole plant species available for on observation.be. So since the 70s, so there is very few data here available. So it was also motivating to try to have a look. So that's it. Here, the old huge terril that has been erased, like they make it plain like that. So and here the newest one. And so there, the interesting thing was that So that looks like that, the whole plane where, so it's the whole terrain should be like that, and then they basically remove a part of it. And the interesting thing here, we experimented another way of doing the BioBlitz more independently with the people freely going and sampling, looking at what they were interested in, using the application. So the application that we use that is connected to observation.be that you can all use if you want. It's observation, it's identify, sorry, but you can also use iNaturalist. It works the same. It's downloaded also on observation.be and on GBIF, which is the global biodiversity platform. And so, yeah, there we basically, I didn't show it here, but we put flags, colorful flags in different areas, or once again, ecotone, so the separation, the zone that is in between the forest and the moor, or on the moor, in the forest, around the little ponds, etc., to be able to have the people going freely and sampling, but at the same time being sure that every different habitat would be sampled at minimum. So that was it. So kind of checkpoints for the people to go. And once again, the collaboration with the friend who was really in a mold blob phase. So he was really interested in putting mosses and blobs in the tree trunks. And the interesting thing in terms of evolution and ecology, urban ecology, was also that it's because it's also an ancient industrial, highly polluted area. So basically heavy metals, as Ronny showed you in the first place, so cadmium, copper, zinc, and all these heavy metals are in a high concentration on these kind of areas. And so you have species, invasive species. That is also a question, a philosophical question of what is an invasive or spreading species. It all depends on the time scale. But for example, here, the Buddleia that you know very well, it's not so visible here, but it's the flower, the butterfly that you can find in every city in the world, well, at least here. And so that is a species that is very tolerant to heavy metal, and that they grow basically in between rocks, in between walls, etc. The Robinia, so it's also very spread, and that's a different story. The Buddleia came because of the railway, the railway system that was they bought and they planted this species to embellish, so to say, the railway instead of using local plants. So now it's spread very well. And the Robinia is also something that was planted the previous century for its also beauty, etc. And this, and on the side you had also Chelidonium, that is a local indigenous species that is very tolerant to heavy metal, and that has also medicinal properties, very famous, and tinctorial also. So that was a point of reflection that we ended up with on the invasive species, and in the end, it brought me to dig a little bit on this invasive species. Plant species topic, and that is something that was funny to map. So it's once again the whole points are plant species, but in gray you have spreading species, in black you have highly invasive species, and the little pink there is soon to be invasive, or to be its watch list. They call that watch list because they don't know yet if it will be spreading. It's too soon to know. And what was interesting is that, so that's how you look at it. And I don't know if you see something appearing. There is some, sorry? Yeah, industrial areas indeed, but, sorry? Yeah, and actually here is the highway and the railway. So basically the species are very concentrated on the railway, along the highways also, like that here. No, here, yeah. Oh, here there's the highway and the railway here. And also, yeah, post-industrial areas, polluted areas, of course. So here is the railway that is really a stream of invasive species, a way of dispersal, and that's connected to my research side, is that I'm interested in plant migration, plant dispersion. And the second point with this mapping, this first this first step of mapping the biodiversity in the city is it was focusing on these areas that were amazingly poorly sampled, and for two different reasons that are kind of funny. This one is the most urbanized areas, the most gray side of the city. So people are not really maybe prone to also participate in sampling or going to monitor biodiversity, and the public services neither, because there is not really interest in sampling what is on a small wasteland or something. And the other one here, which is more interesting, is the university campus. So it's basically a whole forest, protected forest, domanial forest. It's the Sartillement forest. And that was a bit surprising to see that they were so poorly sampled. And the reason is another reason is because there is actually a lot of data that has been collected during master thesis, PhD thesis, or researches, but that are kind of enclosed in the hidden from the open platforms, because they are basically in master thesis that nobody reads, or PhD thesis that nobody reads neither. So overlooked or data not uploaded needs to do some more bioblitzes, or to try to dig into the data sources that could be available. So yeah, another funny thing that we did, a bit crazy, we spent the whole night waking up to do a moth sample, which was kind of amazing. It was actually in the wasteland of the Chartreuse Park that I showed you earlier. And we spent the whole night there with people completely drunk coming and seeing us like, hey, what are you doing? And they were like, we would just wait because you have to wait the whole night. And then at 5, 6 a.m. you collect and sample. And we were actually with the Flemish butterfly, entomology society people that are really libraries in themselves. We didn't know nothing about the moth at first. And so once again, that was also a collaboration with this citizen association of La Chartreuse, so it's called Un Air de Chartreuse. And we after the whole night, they identified more than 80 different species of moths, which was kind of, for us, really amazing. For them, oh yeah, but there are classical species. It's just that nobody really do that regularly. It's done once again in reserve area and so on. So it was not amazing. There were like 2 or 3 rare species, but what was amazing is to find that much species in this time of the year in a fully urbanized area. Is just this little piece of wood conserved. That was that was really interesting. So yeah, that's it. I will pass through that. That's one of the last one that we organized, also in an area that was impacted by industrial pollution, Vieille Montagne, which is the first factory, the first industry that was created in Liège, one of the first actually in Belgium also. And so it's an historic pollution that is in the soil, and there is a conservation plan right now to reopen the place, because some species, rare species, adapted, tolerant to heavy metals, need to be in open environments, and no, because colonize this area. So that was also a collaboration with Chaudfontaine, the commune there. Anyway, it's out of time, but it's also a video from an activity that we did with some kids from the communal primary school just next to that. So that was also a nice experience. And then is drawings from an architect, landscape architect, Elisa Baldin, which is one of the colleagues I'm working with in La Cime. And so she's bringing the really historical side and landscape and sensible side on this biopic. So here it's her drawing of the evolution of time with this and the impact of this particular here. That's it. That's with also kids, where we also popularize also the use of binocular or microscope to try to draw something, and that is a collaborative map actually drawing. So what they call the sensible map. So I don't know if you're familiar with this kind of topic. It's basically building a map that is not only a scientific, geographical, topographical, accurate map is that, but with the incorporation of sensible, personal aspects or stuff that are highlights for you. So that was an experience to try to do that with children, with kids, and they were very, and it's still ongoing. We're finishing the map right now, but it's funny to see what is attracting the whole. Their own view, and that's the whole also philosophy of Lassim, is try to broaden the sight or the idea of what is the environment and what is the diversity of life in your direct surrounding. They are all, it's the youth association, youth center. So that's it. I think I'm done in time to show anything. No problem. I will talk about Marxism another time, or if you have questions.
Yeah, thanks. Listening to all these fantastic presentations, I had prepared a whole text to sort of connect everything, but I guess I will try to abbreviate that enormously. But this notion, one of the things that have always has inspired me a lot in dealing with this topic is this book that was published in 2017, and you have to actually really turn it around. So it's a very active book, and it's called Arts of Living on a Damaged Planet. So it has a ghost part and a monster part, and it has fantastic authors like Ursula Le Guin and Donna Haraway, who talks a lot about this issue of staying with the trouble, to create hybrid figures, and making wit in symbiosis with critters or creatures, of which we saw quite a few examples actually. And learning to stay with the trouble of living and dying together on damaged earth will prove more conducive to the kind of thinking that would provide the means to building more livable futures. And she's amongst others influenced by someone like Lynn Margulis, who was the first to talk about the importance of symbiosis, the living with strangers, actually living with others, out of which came also the idea that actually we as humans are a multitude of that we have this. You talked about this lichen that is living on a lichen is living on a lichen, but actually we are all that. If you look at us on a microscopic level. So the so-called, well, I'm trying to skip some things, otherwise we sit here around midnight. But one of the things that seem to be very important in all of your research, because I think the artists are researchers, the scientists can be artists in a way, in the way that they do with it, is making visible the invisible. And before we started this evening, Ronny said, yeah, it depends a bit on how you define the invisible. So it's either what you cannot see, for which you need a microscope, or it's things that we deny, like the results of colonialism. And I would like to connect that also, and so you can respond to alter it in whatever way, to the title of this evening, Restoring the Human Element. But in all of your talks, the human is actually quite present. Poisoning the world, doing research in a certain kind of way. So has the human ever been absent? Sort of like Latour's "We've never been modern," like human has always been there, but it depends a bit on how. So I don't know who wants to respond to that.
Well, for me, actually, the title was it sounded also even a little bit provocative.
Yeah.
To restore the human, well, put him at his place and restore the rest, you know. So that's I don't know where you want to go to with that, but yeah.
Well, that's basically what I want to say about it.
Okay.
But for me, it was more human should be empathic, and it's not empathic anymore as a human being to the nature. And so I focused on the restoring this empathic part.
Yeah, but perhaps we have to realize that in terms of the presence of humans and the time scales that we are talking about, that I would say that let's say up to maybe not more than 50 years ago, humans have been completely neglected of and realizing what's their role and how they should be approaching the environment that actually creates their own ecosystem. That realization only started, I think, much earlier than, let's say, the 1960s. So that is something like 50, 60 years ago. And it's only now that we're starting to realize that we have to become a careful with a certain awareness of how we fit in the ecosystem that so far we have only been exploiting. But that's only 60 years ago that appreciation developed. And as I showed you on the graph with the oxygen profiles, it's only 2007 that we got into the situation here nearby in Zaal that was, let's say, something that you could consider to be acceptable. So we have to realize that we basically are just starting to make sense in terms of living and being part of, let's say, the global ecosystem. So we still have to learn a lot. In my opinion, we are only starting to do so. So maybe if you look back within 200 or 300 years, we will say, people, what have we been doing before? How is this possible? And that is just emerging, in my opinion.
Yeah. Even though, as
Eva stated, that someone like von Humboldt was very early in pointing out that things were terribly were going terribly wrong. It is effectively only recently, and one of the responses to that has also been that, like, yeah, the Earth could do without us humans. But someone like, as the astrophysicist Hubert Reeves has actually said, well, no. Humans were not just simply added to nature, they form effectively a part of it, only they also have a responsibility, as you were pointing out. I don't know, do you both want to respond maybe to what has been said so far?
Well, I will agree with everyone that has talked right now, but yeah, it's, as I showed also, it's really at the core of the dynamic of this of LACIM level. So to try to broaden the view and on the actual urban environment that has been viewed as something that is where the diversity of life has disappeared, and that's true, that has been very impacted, but to show that actually all life form lives behind the walls, etc., along the pavement of the streets, and that's a way to change to zoom out or in the environment that we all in, and to try to also restore, I will not say restore the human, but restore the sites on what is the diversity of life and the ecosystems around us, to be able to have a better, to have a better, I believe that if you don't have a connection to something, if you don't experience firsthand something, you cannot care about something. So basically, that's the main idea that promoted the fact that we organize this kind of event, and also just biodiversity walk. That's also something that rings a bell when they were during the presentations, the philosophical aspects of all this. It's interesting. I'm still collaborating with a philosopher that is a colleague from Patient Desprez, and so connected to Anna Singh, the co-author of the book, that accompanied me on I met Anna Singh actually, that went, she went on the Chartreuse Park for the ZAD, so just to wrap up that he was... Oh, no, yeah, and for the experiment of the autonomous activist zone that was defending there to fight against the building project, but and she was there by chance. She was receiving the honoris causa of the university, but the philosopher that was organizing this, he was really interested in this biodiversity walks that we were organizing in the city, and so he wanted that I go with him. And he recorded the discussion that we had. And the funny thing is that I was just wanting to cross a bridge of the city to look at the little lichens and mosses that was growing on the concrete, basically, or even on the pavement and on this bridge that is fully artificial. And we ended up by spending the whole hour just doing 100 meters because there were so many discussion ideas, and he was going with this philosophical point of view of space and time changing with the scale. So the more you go on smaller scale, the more you extend the space, basically. So you make a step or you stay in.
Before I give the mic to Marjolijn, maybe to respond, is that in Arts of Living on a Damaged Planet, they stress the importance of curiosity. They say in order to survive, we need to relearn multiple forms of curiosity. Curiosity is an attunement to multi-species entanglement, complexity, and the shimmer all around us. And when you talk about your work on electricity, that we don't see it anymore, I think that is quite related, isn't it, to this notion of curiosity and the need for curiosity.
Yes, also, yes, the invisible, also, I think a notion that is important is empathy and feeling connected and related to your surrounding and to things that are out of sight, maybe somewhere else on this planet, and the effect of your actions that have an effect somewhere else. And I think when I was thinking about restoring the human element, I also thought about that, like it's not only about the ecosystem, but it's also affecting a lot of people's lives everywhere around the world. And that's something that's also sometimes overlooked and not so much seen in connection to each other. Like a lot of things are separated these days, and I think it's very important to see things as more as a whole and how things are interconnected and related to each other. So, yes, I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that's the idea of the notion of entanglement, or the tree of life that is replaced by a web these days as well. You wanted to respond, Van? Or?
Yeah, I want to say something also about which is a little bit also the opposite side, in the sense that there are now talks like we have to start geoengineering because it's too late. So we have to start managing the planet. And so there's one solution, which is a solution of like get everyone their own energy and get that we don't pollute anymore. But the politics should change in that sense. But you see now, I just read that the Belgian policies they decided to have these mini nuclear power plants. Instead of, there are so many other alternatives, but that's not the manager's mentality. So they need to centralize the energy so that we can distribute, and that there's an internal passing by the Casa all the time by central control. But that's what I see what is happening. So it's too late now. Now we have to take control, and that's I think that's the scary thing, which is not put the man on the side. No, now we have to go and really get on top of it.
Luckily,
that's a hyper-modernist mentality. Sorry?
Luckily, humans are regulators, as Ronny pointed out.
Regulated, yeah, well, but that's maybe
in a different kind of way.
So
how? Yeah, maybe the connection is you have what I presented is regulators from a biological perspective. Now the next step, and it starts with there's a kind of a biological evolution, but I need to come to cultural evolution because if you look at human evolution, biological evolution translates, continues into cultural evolution. And the thing is, it's also in biology, the driver is to become more and more independent of your environment. And the last, one of the most final biological steps was to become independent from temperature. So only birds and mammals have been able to do that. But then also part of biological evolution is the evolution of the brain. And especially then the human brain has created the possibilities to escape from the limits of biological evolution. It's of course still invented by the brain, so that's a biological component. But then the next step is to disconnect you from your biological limitations. And then we start to invent all kinds of things. Housings with heatings, as a simple example, but also mobile phones. These do things that the biology can no longer do. And that's the cultural evolution. Now, man has taken that so far, and sometimes in a rather, let's say, accelerated and not so smart way, that all kinds of accidents have happened. And that's, I think, where we are ending up now, that we now have to start to remediate, again, by the capacities of our biological brain, but then in cultural evolutionary context, to start to now to try to readjust what actually has gone totally wrong, and has gone totally wrong, let's say, over a period of not much more than 100 years. And there are now limitations. It's no longer about let's stop this and that. It will return back to the normal thermodynamics. That will not happen anymore. We have basically passed that point. And so, we are getting into, you can call it regulation, but it's basically remediation as far as possible.
As a final question, maybe, and maybe also quite crucial question that was raised in the introduction. So can the arts effectively play a role in rectifying the imbalance by reintroducing the human and environmental element as the center of scientific and technological advancement? And Donna Haraway in this context stresses the fact that the arts of living on a damaged planet demand a symbiotic thinking and action. So that is to say, a making with. Now, when observing all of your presentations and seeing how you, Ronny, or you, Florian, work with artists or are interested in how they work, it seems that artists are extremely good in visualizing the invisible. I was very happy in that, well, happy with all the presentations, but some of the elements that I didn't know about your work, Frank, where you actually go into the labs and make things visible that stay invisible and are critical, and then you visualize it as well.
And they use my visual.
Well, yeah, and also the program that then can be used. You talked about they use our program, so you work with a team, I imagine.
No, yeah.
Maybe everyone.
This was so I worked with people from a game company in the States, in California. They want to be mentioned, so they did that in their spare time. So on low cost, because some of them they wanted to participate in these kind of things, but don't use our names. But then one of the things for us was so in fact it's a very interesting research to see like how can we visualize this. So we have all this data, and then so we turned it into this. Well, IPCC also works with those maps, but they were very they were not so dynamic as the way that we started to use them. And then also to have these maps with all the data to transfer the literal in visuals. Like so much population, so then you see so many people walking around there, or buildings that grow like mushrooms at that place. So that's yeah. But then, so how to make those maps? That was a program that was for us very easy to scroll through, and so. But then I didn't know. But then the scientists we were working with, they said, "But it's such a fantastic program that we make. We're using it now."
I think artists have a different approach, different view, and for me it's clear that I want to transmit something and give more connection back to the humans. And I think visuals are more staying in the brain than having a data, Excel historics, anything, you know. For example, for the paper trees, if you know that your trees in the garden will be cut and not growing back because you're using piles of paper, you have a different relationship to it instead of looking how many kilograms I'm using. And I think that's advantage of being an artist, that your brain is maybe working a bit different, or you don't have this limit, or you have to have a result, you know, to have to shown in your lab. It's only you want to tell something and telling in a different way. So I think that's good to have this mixture between arts and science.
Yes, maybe something to add. Yeah, I think absolutely agree. I think in terms of the visualizations, that's one thing, and that is, I think, more to present the message, to make it visual and also generate the absolutely needed impact, the reach out. But there is also something else, and I think you already referred to it, and that is where, in the beginning of a project, of an idea, that we bring the brains of the artists and the scientists and perhaps all the stakeholders together. Because I also believe that in the way we approach things, we think about things, there may be different parts of the brains that are activated. And what we are missing today is to bring these together at the moment of the creation. Often it happens at the moment when the product is already there. It's also of interest, the thing that you mentioned with these software developers in gaming. It's in your application, but it's also it's coming more and more that they develop their software with challenges to make a game, and that has to operate fast and do all kinds of things. Challenges that are not exactly the same that what on average in science pop up. And that's why the game software developers are in certain aspects of programming much more advanced than the informatics scientists. And so there are a number of examples already now that basically a tool developed from a scientific perspective, as the example that you give, it can be, let's say, much more advanced just by using the knowledge and the things that these gamers have developed in a completely different mission. We were not thinking about that at all. But now we see that that can be brought together. But I think the same can happen when in an early phase of a project, you also bring the brain of the artist into the science, or vice versa, because that can also happen.
Do you want to respond?
Well, yeah, if you always ask me if I want to respond, I will say yes. But yeah, I couldn't agree more with what has just been said. I would just maybe add that, well, there's two funny things. Just parenthesis for I was amazed by the project of also the video game company collaboration. And it's actually a dream that I had before creating this open lab. When I just defended my PhD thesis, I was really showing basically maps, and that was one of my motivation to seek into the technological advancement of the modelization capacity, etc., trying to integrate the migration capacity by wind, something completely crazy and actually not feasible. It was just a way to increase the realness or the reliability of the model, but it was a bit, it's just an ongoing process. But I was just thinking, like, this is visually showing the impact of possible climate changes scenarios on maps. So that's basically something that I found it like something really nice to show or to spread or to spread the curiosity, also the create a more visually explicit material for this kind of research. It's way more sexy than a GIEC, an IPCC report to read for the people, to show a map of what will be going on really if we align with the models. And I met a less enthusiastic video game developer that told me it's very expensive to develop a video game. So your idea is really nice because my idea was really naive. It was just I'm using model where I integrate different parameters of climate, wind, current, topography, etc. And I was saying this could be converted as parameters from a video game, and you could play a video game that is based on different climatic scenarios. And actually, I have a very close friend that is working in the video game industry, but working as a visual artist, character designer, and he was really excited. But it's not realistic to yet, unfortunately, to combine science with video game industry. That's a pain. It's a really huge chance that you have this collaboration, and I think that's really promising. Yeah.
Maybe Marjolijn as well. Can you talk about this notion of visualization as important input by the artist? Do you think?
Yes, and I also think it's very important to see, for me, to collaborate with. I collaborate with a lot of different disciplines, also artisans or technicians and scientists. I think for me, it's in the end also very important to make an artwork that communicates something that cannot be communicated by science. And it emphasizes things that cannot be objectified or cannot be researched like science can be researched. I think art is really a different way of looking at the world in that sense. And I think collaborations with all these different disciplines can really even make it more wide, your perspective, and be more innovative and cross borders with sometimes materiality or ecosystems or any kind of subject you're working with. And besides that, I think it's also very important to always look in a different kind of context, like social political dimensions of certain issues, which is mostly not the kind of perspective of scientists per definition when they're working on a topic, because they're very specialized in a certain area within a very specific place without maybe looking at relations to other sciences or other things that are going on in society at that moment of time, which I think art can also be helpful in looking at this kind of, making these kind of connections.
Thank you very much. I don't know, are there any questions in the audience? Does the audience have any questions? Or are we just very tired now? Then in that case, I would like to thank you all very much. I thought it was a really interesting conversation to hear all your presentations. I hope the audience liked it as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here anymore, I guess. So thank you all. Thanks for the organization, for the invite. And you want to say something, Kristof?
Yes, thank you for staying so long in this marathon. Thank you, Alexandra, for co-organizing this, and Edith, of course, for the moderation. Thank you, all the artists and scientists, or artist-scientists. It was a very interesting evening, I think, and a lot to think about in our art practices or our researchers. So let's have a drink on that. Thank you.